So I think I'm going to start right now at the second time. And some of you already know, I'm Yuly, my name is Yuly, I come from Colombia, I'm a doctoral student at Salle University, Bogotá, Colombia. And I'm also a language teacher in a public school. I've been a teacher for more than 12 years. And during the path of my doctorate, I went to FAU to work with Dr. Andrés Ramírez at the beginning of this year for 5 months. And for that period of time, I just got to know more about ASFLA and genre-based pedagogy. That was totally new for me. In fact, my research is not about ASFL or genre-based pedagogy, it's about another totally different field. But that experience just made me realize that all the path that I have maybe crossed during my experience as a teacher was kind of doing something wrong. I didn't feel well with my teaching practice. And that was like a moment of life when I found Andrés, and he just pushed me to discover this pedagogy. And now he is doing more regarding the genre-based pedagogy, and especially in bilingual language, bilingual genre-based pedagogy. So I felt like kind of a surprise. It was like a live moment for me. So what we are going to present today is kind of for me a celebration, just because I could change part of my teaching practices in Colombia, because once I went back to Colombia, I had the opportunity to apply everything in my real classroom with my students within a public context. So what you are going to see today is first one approach that Dr. Ramírez is developing right now, which is multilingual reading to learn pedagogy. And then we are going to cover part of the live review related to the debates surrounding genre-based pedagogy, the ones that already took place here in Australia, and then the ones that are going on right now in the United States, and possibly is going to happen in Colombia, because I have to mention that genre-based pedagogy is not part of our curriculum. It's something new. In fact, I didn't find any study about this pedagogy in Colombia, maybe in other parts of Latin America. I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm just exploring this right now. But at least in Colombia, in public schools, there is something that is within the curriculum. So this is how this presentation is going to be divided. So first, I will just give you an approach, and I will give you a comment of what multilingual reading to learn means. But within the Colombian context, I will talk about bilingual reading to learn, because in my classroom, I don't have multilingual students. I just have that will be developed in English and Spanish. So that's why I'm going to talk about bilingual reading to learn. After that, we will cover the lead review of the debates in Australia and the United States. And finally, I will give my perspective from my positionality as a teacher in an official school in Colombia, based on some principles from the Southern epistemologies. So we are going to do that. Those concepts from the Southern epistemologies are kind of abstract, so I will put it I will combine the abstract terms of Southern epistemologies with my teaching practice. So this is the teaching cycle that we developed. We are going to focus on one experience in one grade, which is sixth grade. And this teaching cycle corresponds to one of the contents that is within the curriculum for teaching English as a second language in Colombia, which is local places. So Montserrat is a very popular local place in Bogotá. So if you get to go to Bogotá, you have to go to Montserrat. And we adapted a text. I say that we, because Andrea, during all the process when I applied this methodology. So we adapted the test, we followed all the stages, and we emulated the principles of genre-based pedagogy. So that is guidance through interaction in the context of a shared experience, but in this case, there will be guidance through bilingual interaction in the context of a shared experience. And of course, gradual increase of the third language, and finally, the systematic and purposeful use of the first and foreign language in continental language instruction. I have to say that before knowing Japanese pedagogy, due to the monolingual ideologies that are in the Colombian context, I didn't use the first language. It was kind of a void. It was kind of, it was related to something bad. But after this, I just use it as a resource to enhance the process in the second language or in the foreign language. So this is the bilingual reading to learn cycle. So first, we did the cycle in Spanish, which is this one, preparación, construcción conjunta, and then independent construction. And then we did the same cycle in English. So we use, which is basically we follow the same stages, preparation, joint construction, and independent construction, but we use these as the basis to scaffold the teaching learning cycle in English. So that is good because, as you will see at the end of the presentation, that allows us to have to use the languages, the language of the student, and to recognize them as knowers. And that fact is just realizing that they can develop processes using the first language, and we can use that as a meaningful insight to do in English. So that is the bilingual reading to learn cycles, and we use a descriptive report based on the topic I just mentioned, that is about Montserrat, it's about a place in Bogota, and you can pass it. So this is the model test that we adapted. Something that it was really difficult for me was to find model text, proper text with topics that were related to the students. And of course, that were related to the standardized curriculum reading Colombia. So that is me in one of my classrooms. We follow this descriptive report, first of all, in Spanish. I introduce my students to the structures, the stages, and etapas and fases in Spanish. And then at the end of the cycle, they produce their own texts in Spanish. But they didn't use the same topic. Maybe you can move it forward. Oh. But they talk about it this time from different places in Colombia. So I recognize the first language, but also the insight that we have related to the places that they know that are close to them. So this is the production of one of my students, and this is the same student writing the final text in English. So to do the cycle in English, we use the same text that we call mirror text, or by mirror text, meaning the same text but translated. And of course, we have to do some adaptation of the text. So it's basically the same text, and this is the production in English of another place which is close to this. So as you maybe know, there are some teaching progressions that we can follow with genre-based pedagogy. So the first one is learning to read, which is for emerging readers, and the other one is in the first language. So you do all these stages and steps just in first language, which in our case is Spanish. And the same, is in English, the same, but the one that we use is first using the first language and then move to the second. So we first did the cycle in Spanish, and then we move to English, but I have to mention that I also did interchangeably. Today I'm going to talk just this cycle that I did with sixth grade, but I also had the opportunity to apply that doing both languages at the same time. So maybe in the next conference, I will present the results of that. So we use a report, as I already mentioned. And yeah, I think you can. So now we are going to concentrate on the lead review about the debates. And as I told before, at the end, I will give you some insights about how this could be approached in a conference like one.
So you might think, oh, all good, general pedagogy, general-based literacy, way to learn, and bilingual education are just hand in hand. Well, as actually David Paul, who's here, Giuseppe and Peter White tell us, right here, we have the same ideas in terms of seeking to address linguistically based social and economic inequality. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Let's begin with literacy debates in Australia. The first idea here is that we have in 2013, for example, we have this beginning, by no means the beginning, but I want to start here. Michael Rosen talking about genre-based pedagogy and how it had failed students and all that. Then response from Francis Christie on the same journal. And then this is in the references if you want to check that out. And then a very, very strong piece by Doki, I don't know, Doc and Green, responding to both Michael Rosen and Francis Christie. And some of the things there are like, wow, we like really, basically that our research is biased, circular, because we quote each other or something like that, and that we actually support unbelievable research. That's exactly what it says. You can read it there. Then also other kind of things that, for example, that we in SFL have this that we rob anything that moves up its life by labeling. That's one. I mean, his perspective, right? Or, for example, that we are reifying knowledge and language. Or this is the one that I'm going to focus a little bit more on because this has been so pervasive. The idea that teachers prescribing formulae for writing text types. What we want to do today is to actually show you, is that true through Yuly's office and through her students in Colombia. For example, right here, you could see, what kind of thing, this kind of thing that, going back to that traditional education, which in the 50s and 40s or etc. Basically talking about these critics of genre-based pedagogy and how they have argued that presently informed genres cannot avoid over prescriptiveness, leading to stifled creativity. So that has been a very, very, very important. And if you've been in the context of this of Australia, that has been forever, like kind of like over and over and over. Anyway, as you can see here, very, very early in 1988, this is from a paper, Semogenesis from Jim Martin, 1989. Very early, they were really concerned about this. They've been talking about this. I say we, this. So basically, it's this idea. Okay, how can we develop teachers who are authorities, but not authoritarian, right? How can we actually avoid the post-progressive developments and actually promote something that is useful for students? Some kind of balance there. So it has been a very, very important way to address this. 1991, Rodri and Martin Horaric, Lindsay's dissertation chair, was very concerned about this, and they were trying to actually really accommodate the idea of this critical literacy movement. And there, you felt it here, we felt it in the United States as well, like this idea that we have to incorporate it. And basically, the argument from Martin Horaric, which I agree with, is that systemic functional linguistics provides theoretical basis for such knowledge, in other words, for critical literacy. She continued to develop this in later, for example, in 1996, she developed these cultural domains in which she says, there's the everyday, there's also the specialized, there's also the reflexive. And these are different kind of like realities, and we have to acknowledge these realities. And then later on, she actually developed even more and want to tell you like here, the everyday or the personal growth literacy, that's fine. Applied skills literacy, theoretical, specialized literacy, reflexive critical literacy. Here is like we wanted to get to there. In other words, we were engaged with them, but from our own perspective, this was what she said. Basically, it was a matter of that if we accept the preeminence importance of critical literacy, then we must constitute it as a dependent phenomenon. In other words, you cannot have critical literacy without having the basics. And she showed in all those articles that I'm showing you that very, very important work. So in a way, this was our response in that sense. I mean our response from the journalist pedagogy. This can be seen early on in 1986 to 1990. This was the first, and you can see there's nothing around critical literacy here. There was nothing like really around that time. Then the next one, the Language and Social Power Project 2, still very, very similar. But then we all know the next cycle with the Write It Right project. And then this is what I want to point out to you right now. This is right there. This is a preoccupation of this. It was incorporated into the teaching learning cycle that we know. In terms of the United States, okay, so that I think that argument was more on the basis of class, you know, that we're leaving these people behind. And from our perspective, it was from Bernstein, right? Like our entry point was class. But right now in the United States, there's this idea of raciolinguistic ideologies that now the entry point is race. And basically, it's about these proponents of translanguaging. If you've heard that, like this very, very, but I mean the strong version of translanguaging. Basically, you'll see why it's very strong version, very post-structuralist, very deconstructivist, not so much proposing, but this deconstruction. We, right there, appropriateness based levels. Go back to the next one. We are actually, these appropriateness based approaches are implicated in the reproduction of racial normativity. That's basically what they're saying. In very, very covert terms, all of us that are thinking about really this you know, academic language and all that, all that is racial linguistics, and we're just not seeing them. Anyway, as you can see, there's a lot of the white speaking subjects, all these things, and I can tell you that my white in the United States, my white colleagues have been really paralyzed by this because they don't know how to respond to this. They're like, maybe I'm going to be canceled by these people. By the way, many of the people that are doing this are Latinos. They are, so it's really difficult to counteract. But we are trying to propose another way, like not to engage directly necessarily, to kind of like have a lot of noise around that, but focus on students, focus on teachers, focus on what we know what to do. Anyway, so we could see all these, all these things, you know, standard language or academic language are racial ideological perceptions, racialized. So it's all about race. If you ask me, it's a lot about race and very little about linguistics. They say racial linguistics, but I think that's and I think in the end is conflating register or confusing register with dialect. That's what I'm thinking, but I haven't developed that argument. Cummings 2021, it's as surprised as this girl, and you might, but because this is all based on this Marconian and Pennycook idea that languages do not exist. This Inventing Languages is a book by Pennycook, and so if they don't exist, then how can we create a bilingual pedagogy? You know, like it's impossible. What are we gonna do? So, you know, all these illegitimate additive approaches are all these teaching by literacy involves teaching standardized. So we're gonna try to show you through through Yuly what our take on that. So why should we care? How should we respond, if at all? We could just leave it that. And what can we learn from similar discussions? Well, we feel that we should care because as genre-based or bilingual pedagogy advocates, we are supposedly, all of us that subscribe to this, implicated in the reproduction of racial normativity. So that's why we should care, I think. Basically, this is, in our review of literature, is a lot of the dynamics between control and creativity. From our perspective, it kind of comes down to that. All that genre initially, critical literacy, or now with the United States with racial linguistics, all that comes to that. By the way, this is not an issue that is just from there, from the genre or from now. Back in 1938, John Dewey wrote a famous book called Experience and Education, in which he actually had to write it to say, if that is progressivism, I'm not a progressivist, because you're just taking it too far. Like the role of the teacher was nowhere there, and these people were just like going along without any like just it's like that. Thing happened with Freud and with Marx when their disciples, advanced something that they didn't say, that kind of thing. Anyway, so let's come back to Yuly and to the last part of the presentation.
So I will provide a little bit of context to you. And I want to mark just 4 points. The first one is that English is mandatory in Colombia as a subject, that we are multilingual. We have more than 65 indigenous languages, and they are in the territory where they are, those territories are bilingual, and those languages are official in Colombia. But in the classroom where I am, we don't have a native language, but just to consider that being bilingual in Colombia is just when you know a foreign language or an hegemonic language. So in that context, the British Council is the one who sets the policy, the language policy in Colombia. So we have the standardized curriculum marked by the Common European Framework. And from that, we have a lot of labelings for our students. And there is a big gap between the official and the private sector in terms of the conditions for accessing to learn a second language. The other thing is that, well, in this particular case, I was working with the students with low socioeconomic level. This is a class of English as a second language, and is in official schools, one of the biggest gap that we have, and the biggest difference is the amount of hours that you are exposed to a target language, and in terms of the lesson. So in a public school, we regularly have 2 hours of English per class per week, and we have a large number of students per class. So it's in this context where I carry out this experience. This is part of the material that I provide to my students. So this is the model tests with some of the specific characteristics of the text. And we have the 2 texts in English and Spanish, as I already said. There is a mirror test. And I acknowledge that teaching English in Colombia has a lot of tensions because of what I just mentioned. It is always colonized, I will say that, by practices from the British Council. We have also a market behind that from the neoliberal times in the 90s. So everything is reproduced in that ideology. So there is like the need to maintain the low leveling in public schools. That is a reflection that I just made. So within that context, I just realized that coloniality is not over, it's all over. So it is not something we need to fight, but also something that we need to respond. And the way that I respond is just to invite new practices in the classroom. And that environment means just make coalition in these 4 principles. And those 4 principles, I just took them from some authors that talk about Southern epistemologies. Those are mostly Latin American authors. They talk about Southern epistemologies, and also I'm just starting to read ecofeminist ideologies that is kind of related to my political position towards public education in Colombia. So the first principle is local knowledge, which is basically recognize the context where the knowledge is produced. So in this case, I recognize not only the first language of my students, but also the places where they are. The problem is not the text. The problem is recognizing the meaning-making framework of my students and make those meaning-making frameworks possible to embody other teaching practices. So in this case, we talk about Humedal de Tibanica, which is Tibanica wetland. It's a wetland that is close to the school. And my students are very active in terms of the conservation of that wetland. So they know pretty well where is it, where is located, what kind of animals they can find there. And so that's why I recognize the knowledge that they have. And from this perspective, I think and I consider we need other ways to see the use of the first language and to re-enunciate. In Spanish, we say renunciar, but in English is renunciate, and what we have just adopted as biases from the north. So the next, the next principle is co-presence. There you can see the authors. We will send you the presentation if you want to explore more the authors, which is the Sousa. This has to do with recognizing them as knowers. When you, in traditional practices, when you teach a language in Colombia, I'm just talking about my experience. We just start from the fact that they don't know English. Yeah, so it's a deficient ideology. But with this, I just recognize that they know a first language, that they have a lot of knowledge, and that you have to use that as an insight, as a meaningful insight. So this is basically the other is sentir, pensar, sentir, hacer, which is a wordplay between the words feeling, thinking, and doing. So within the theory that I have read about Southern epistemologies, there is a very strong intersection between feeling, it's not just feeling that there are social inequities that you need to fight, but also doing. And what should I do? I spent 12 years in my teaching practice doing different things, trying new methodologies, trying this strategy, designing new materials, spending I don't know how many hours in front of the computer doing no sense methodology. You know, it's like that. It's like, and they at the end I was overwhelmed. My students were overwhelmed, but at the end we didn't get anything. So that is the point.
I would just say that this is without just thinking twice about it. Our pedagogy is anchored in equity, and I see a lot of relationship with this with, for example, Marx's 11 theses of Feuerbach. The philosophers have transformed the world, have explained the world. The point is to transform it. The point is to praxis. So this idea of sentir and thinking, that's fine, but let's just do something and re-enunciate, which is a beautiful way of working that. And Yuly certainly did that. Yeah. So
my way of re-enunciate or sentir, pensar, and sentir, hacer is just making otherwise possible. And not patronizing compassion. There is some biases within the language policy discourse. That is, private schools are good, official schools are bad. The students from official schools, they will never reach a good level of English. So they just don't create linear strategy because you for granted that they can do it. But there is something that we as teachers, we need to acknowledge.
So right here, I want to tell you that Yuly is actually doing a unit. This is different. This is a unit on preventing suicide on teens. This is a big problem in Colombia and elsewhere, unfortunately. And the students themselves are actually creating a protocol for the whole school. And the principal, this is really interesting. The principal was have not been able to address this, and it was who was it that addressed it? It was Yuly in the foreign language class. Like that's what, you know, like usually those topics and foreign language don't go together. but they can go together because of this new availability of knowledge that she has put through the first language. Just to finish, I don't see any standardized language norms in a prescriptive way. The students talk about Hiato, tamales, and sancocho, and I mean, come on, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Keep going.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention that even the title, there is a place in Colombia that is called mesitas, which means little tables.
Oh,
Then colegio, from the school.
that's a proper name.
So the students relate the school together.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
it was just a goal that they could
Yes.
at the end write so many texts in a foreign language. So to me, it was just
The idea of reinforcing the system of power, I mean, this and that they don't have means to play with it or get behind it or question it. I mean, you see her data and it's like, what are you talking about? And then in terms of being busy, because Rosen says, to my mind, it is too busy making you depressed and feel incapable. Well, I dare you to think about this girl is feeling like that. I mean, that she is feeling accomplished and the opposite completely. The next one, you see this idea of coming back to educational authoritarianism. And yes, they are in lines and all that because they are 42 students. But look at this. If you focus on only one student and how they go from one picture to another picture, this was during detailed reading, David. It was like, I mean, they all wanted to participate. This doesn't look like what Rosen's picture, Rose? I don't know, this is something else. Anyway, so to finish right here, with Freire.
Yeah, I just want to finish this presentation with this Freire quote that just shows pretty well my theology and positionality that is political but also ethical with my students. So I think we need to make things possible. We need more teachers in a setting like this because that is the real setting where the changing is happening. And if we are going to teach otherwise, we need to make that dialogue possible in all kind of
Did
settings.
you say teach otherwise? That's from Maxine Green. No, but that's fine. That's great. From Maxine Green said to think otherwise, and now she's saying teach otherwise. Yes, that's great. So this is our presentation is there, the whole thing. So you just take a picture and if you want, and we are open to dialogue with you. Any questions or comments? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting to see how you translated into ESL teaching. I was very excited about these views and science for the preparation. But I want to have you do the transition back to the stage where you do the second language. And the follow-up question is, can you do that because Spanish and English has a lot of vocabulary lexis that you can kind of infer from the Latin group, particularly your Texas descriptive report, those are scientific words. And I'm thinking about Vietnamese. If we do that in Vietnamese, then we can do it only very few knowledge. Besides the scaffolding at all. That's on top of my head right now. So how do we do the transition?
Well, I had 3 different experiences. So the first one was doing first the cycle in Spanish and then the cycle in English. So I just finished the cycle, I did the production in Spanish and then I did the same in English. So there was not a transition officially. But I did one cycle in Spanish and one cycle in English. Another experience was doing both language interchangeably. So Dr. Andrés is right now writing a book about that. and I use that. So there are some parts in the class when I use Spanish, which is mostly at the beginning of the class in the preparation, and then in the detail reading, I use both languages, but it depends on mostly on the response of the students. I use it mostly for instructional, for giving instructions. And for the vocabulary, I just give them some like keys in the detailed reading. What I was doing in the detailed reading, I just give them some keys. And those keys were like mostly using synonyms, so give them context of the words. So at the end, they have a bigger bank of words and vocabulary.
Let me give you an example. I remember talking to Yuly, and she said they don't have enough language to actually write on the second language, on the joint construction. And I told her, well, maybe they need more support there because they are writing in a second language. Why don't we try with lexicogrammatical breadcrumbs? That's what and she kept leaving those lexicogrammatical breadcrumbs in phrases, things that then the students copied, and then they had them in their notebooks. And sure enough, later on, they actually came up with that term itself, right? Specifically to that. So I could say that was helpful in that sense.
That was mostly in the elaboration part when I put all that inside and I made them more explicit in that part.
David.
Well, I was just going to be a question, but I can just say what Harry did for Indonesian. Is that she did what you said in the elaborations. You're giving them all these resources, but that really comes of its own in the note-taking stage.
Yes.
Because they make notes on the board in the first language, but then they get translated into the target language. Right? There's notes, and then you use those notes in the target language and guide them to put those into a new text.
Yes.
Yeah. Then are you doing that?
Yeah.
Lily.
Yeah, that's wonderful presentation. I feel like I am at home. The energy. One question that I had, when I work with narratives, and I found that the structure sometimes of what we do in Spanish is different from the way we organize information and structure, and kind of like the text type of what we do in English. So the models that we're using in Spanish are influenced by what you see. Maybe in the description and the descriptive reporting is very similar. It's not the same narrative. But I was wondering if you had encountered any differences between what you see in model text in Spanish as to what you see in English, because I feel like there might be, but that's just my intuition. So, and how whether you bring them to the surface for the students to see, so that they can develop also this idea of, this is kind of how we do it in Spanish, and these little tweaks, will help you achieve the same purpose in English.
We have to work a lot on the adaptation of the text, because of course, you know that our writing in Spanish is more circular, so we go around the same idea many times. And of course, when I translate the text, like in Spanish was this size, and in English was this size, but I want them to get the meaning. So that's why we have many talks about that, and then say, Andrés, please revise this text.
One of the things that I say, if we're using mirror texts, I start with the Spanish text. I would have good Spanish text. If the English gets co-opted, so be it. I mean, I don't care that much about it, because usually it's the other way around. The English is the one that drives the other. So for this specific thing, I think we need to find really good Spanish text or first language texts, and let the English accommodate to that, not the other way around. I mean, one way to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's wonderful in the sense that it's also empowering and respectful of the students as knowers.
Exactly.
To bring this like, to the surface and so it's, and another way in which you can say that you're actually, not copying and reproducing this, authoritarian or whatever that very words that you model.
I think what Mary McIntyre gave us was that, like, hey, you need this first in order to. Gabriel Garcia Marquez from Colombia he created a whole genre of realismo mágico, magic realism. But he didn't do that. He didn't do that all of a sudden. He actually went through all the stages. By the way, if you look at all their geniuses, Dali, it was the same thing. He was a master on the basics, and then once he was a master, he was able to explore. I think that's what it comes down to in that sense. That's and in fact the philosophies from the South, the epistemology from the South, kind of relieves us from that. Like, hey, you're using a colonial language. Yeah, like coloniality, we are speaking coloniality every time we speak. We cannot undo that, but we could take the master's tools and use it for the kids' purposes, right? If you see the reference to Hegel. Anyway, this is the idea. Let's use the power, these powerful tools for these kids' equality and all that.
Thank you.
Congratulations, you guys. Really great. Amazing.
It was very inspiring.
Precioso. Ay, gracias. Precioso. Me encanta lo que están haciendo. Voy a preparar, pero me encanta, la verdad.